Okay, we are live. This is the CrossPolitic Countdown. I'm Andrew Southwick today, joined by managing editor of CrossPolitic, Justin Chartrey, and journalist Kevin Amundsen. My friends, Justin, good to see you again. Let's start with Kevin. Welcome to the program. Thanks for jumping on today.
Thanks for having me on.
Looking forward to getting into it. Justin, we just had the debut show last week. I know we had some good comments from that. How are you doing today? We got a lot to talk about, but we want to make sure to be polite and say hello to everybody.
Yeah, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Really great responses from the first show that we had last week. Is a kind of seemed like a bit of things coming to fruition. Talking to Gabe about the show and just what we're seeing here. It like to see the engagement and really just trying to pull people in from all over the country. And get some more responses. Again, we really want to expand this network of journalists. So, somebody like Kevin who lives in Minnesota, who is reporting on a lot of really good stories for us from that region. That's the kind of impact we want to have in all 50 states. So excited to have him join us today and really just see what can be done, bringing more people on like him who will be, truth-centered journalists in different parts of the country.
And as you can see along the bottom of the screen, crosspoliticnews.com is a place you can go to find every story that we bring you each week. On the countdown, you can also find us on X, CP News USA, at CP News USA. We're going to put that up on the screen as well. But let's get started here. Kevin, this is a story you brought to the table. Let me bring this on the screen. We'll read a little bit of it here. But this is... The Moscow murder continues to unfold. Of course, this is the Kohberger murders. Underneath that, a couple of notes from the article. Court blocks further crime scene images after victims' relatives file an emergency lawsuit over the 2022 killings. The families of Brian Kohberger's murder victims are battling to stop the release of more graphic crime scene photos, filing an emergency lawsuit after nearly 200 images from the gruesome November 22 killings were made public last week. The legal action comes more than 2.5 years after the predatory attack that terrorized the small college town and launched one of the state's most intensive criminal investigations. There you see one of the tweets. Let me stop there. And Kevin, bring us in on what you covered here for CrossPolitic.
So yeah, the big thing that came into the spotlight recently was the release of these 200 images, the actual crime scene photos. They had blurred out the victims, but there's a lot of emotions drawn up in the presentation of that kind of information just flooding out there, and the new spotlight shown on the results from the aftermath of those murders. This is something that rocked that community. I did not remember hearing much about it back in 2022, back when it happened here in Minnesota. But as more of the information, as they got closer to pegging an actual suspect, Kohberger, then news started coming into Minnesota. But yeah, that it would be a very intense grieving process to have gone through that quite a few years ago and then have it all pop back up again as people start reanalyzing the whole situation.
Justin, what does this tell you about? I mean, we've known that we are a sensationalistic people. We true crime is among the most popular podcasts and television shows for a reason. People are fascinated by this. But we have these leaks, and every crime is brutal. I'm not going to say one is worse than another. This is the taking of a human life. In this case, taking of 4 lives, and just horrible. I remember it very well. It was Northwest. I'm from the Northwest originally, so I was keeping an eye on my old stomping grounds. But Justin, what does this tell you? I mean, the fact that people would leak this, who wants to see that kind of brutality? Who wants to see that kind of evil? Yet it does seem to be we have a thirst for that in our country. I mean, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a part of human nature to want to delve into the things that are sensationalistic, that thrill the senses, I guess, in a way. You just look at Hollywood, right? I mean, the movies that are leading the charge in Hollywood right now are the ones that are the most violent, the most gory. Horror is a huge genre. Things like that seem to speak to the fact that we live in a culture of death. I mean, if you think about it, across the spectrum, we have a culture of death that pervades everything, and this is just another part of that. The leaks themselves provide no purpose. I mean, if you think about it, the case has been wrapped up. As sad as it may be, the Idaho grand jury and the state attorney's office and everybody, they accepted a plea deal from Kohberger that he would plead guilty in order to avoid the death penalty, in which case he is now serving a life imprisonment for these murders. And so that was something that wrapped up a couple of months ago. and now you have these leaks that happen. The only purpose for it is for clicks, right? I mean, it's just to get the conversation going and point it in a certain direction. And that truly is sad, because again, these families have been grieving for 2.5, almost 3 years over the loss of their loved ones. And there just does not seem to be any compassion for those people when it comes to just trying to push a story.
Yeah, I want to look at one more piece here that I thought, or one more section from this, the human cost of transparency. I thought this was a really good portion of the article, Kevin. The nearly 200 crime scene photos released by Moscow police showed what investigators described as a horrific crime scene, that included their victims' bedrooms, the sliding door Kohberger entered through, blood on the doors and walls. Of course, at the time, there was so much blood, it seeped out the exterior wall and into the parking lot. Just awful. The families received no advance notice about the photo release, though such notification isn't legally required. The emotional toll was described by the family's lawyer or attorney. Images are powerful emotional triggers, and I'm just one attorney. I can only do as much as I can do. I'm trying to stop what I can. Honestly, I feel like I'm standing in front of a flood coming at me with the Dixie cup. Close quote. Judge Marshall found that major portions of what had been released did not constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy. However, he stated that portions of videos and photographs in their redacted form, specifically including the unreleased body cam video, could constitute an unwarranted invasion of privacy. Kevin, did you get any? Do you have any clarity? What's the line of unwarranted invasion of privacy? I mean, to me, it seems like if photos are leaked of my family and I didn't say yes, there's your. It doesn't matter what it's at. We could be playing volleyball at the staff picnic. That there's an unwarranted invasion of privacy if it doesn't have my consent in some way. Do you have any idea as to what the legal line of that is in your research of this article?
So there's two components of this. One is you have to have transparency for the actual case as it goes forward to determine what actually happened, right? That's how justice is established, is by examining the evidence. And so there's a necessity for that. What these got released was by a public information request, and they then just came out. I think what hurts or upsets us is that, just as Justin was talking about, there's a humanity factor. These are people made in the image of God who were killed, and it's upsetting to see that utilized for clickbait, just to get more views and sensationalize a story once again, when these were real people. They had lives that were taken from them through brutality.
Yeah. From that brutality, let's change gears here a little bit. It is sad, those things that get released like that, but we need to move into politics here. Redistricting is the name of the game all around America. We have seen redistricting in Florida. We're seeing it in California, and specifically in Texas. Let's look at a little bit of this here. Trump proposal continues to draws contentious reviews, pushing for comprehensive peace deals. Oh, wait, I introed the wrong one. This is peace deal for Ukraine. So let's do that story first. How about? There we go.
Sounds good.
Comprehensive Ukraine peace deal obstacles remain following a summit in Washington on August 18th with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Several European leaders and President Donald Trump outlined a framework for negotiations that aimed at ending the war in Ukraine. The proposals have drawn both cautious optimism and sharp criticism. Trump's message was clear, opting for a comprehensive peace deal negotiated directly between Ukraine and Russia rather than a step-by-step approach, which is favored by the European allies, stating a need for a ceasefire is unnecessary. On the question of security, Trump suggested extending the U.S. security assurances to Ukraine, similar to NATO's Article 5 commitment, where an attack on one member is considered an attack on all. Trump did reemphasize, however, that this would not include NATO membership for Ukraine and ruled out deploying American ground troops. Instead, the president has suggested that the U.S. play a supporting role in the form of air power. Trump saying we are willing to help them with things, especially probably by air. What that entails has yet to be disclosed. This Ukraine-Russia war battle has been a mess from the beginning. Do you see, let's start with Justin here, do you see this as the beginning of a way out? Are these negotiations going to hold? Because when I see this, and I've watched this unfold, it seems a little bit like, Putin is waiting to see if America will pack up our bags and go home like we did in Afghanistan. And Zelensky seems to have, well, and again, and I'll say just from me, and I'm not saying this is CrossPolitic's position. To me, these are two thugs, two bad guys fighting, and we're trying to keep some peace and also keep ourselves, America, from getting drawn into a ground conflict, which is one other reason why we don't want Ukraine in NATO. Do you see this though as the beginning of an actual peace being brokered, or is this another, hey, we sat down and nothing got done, and next year we'll come back at it? What's your take on this, Justin?
I think my take and my hope, honestly, is that Trump is this is art of the deal Trump. This is the part of his character and personality that is trying whatever means necessary to get a deal that is favorable for America, for the people of our nation. But ultimately, I mean, I think the biggest thing for me that stuck out about this story is the fact that whereas the rest of the European nations and NATO have been focused on a ceasefire as being kind of the starting point of peace negotiations, Trump has just decided, forget that. We're not going to, try and squabble over a ceasefire, which nobody holds to. I mean, you can look at Israel-Palestine to see that unfold and realize that ceasefires are a waste of everybody's time because it only works as long as both parties agree, and they rarely do. So the fact that he is willing to just dive in, get up to his elbows in the muck that's going on over there and just say, hey, let's come to an agreement, speaks to me that there's a real possibility here. I also think the fact that the way that Zelensky came back into meetings with Trump recently, far cry from what happened a few months ago when basically Trump and Vance were stonewalling Zelensky's requests for more aid, more finances, and more everything, support from America. And we're just saying we're not going to play those games anymore. This needs to get done, and this needs to get finished. We need to get over the finish line quickly.
Some say, Kevin, that Zelensky is holding out. He doesn't want to give up a certain ground, certain pieces of land. I think what's the Donetsk, I think, is the thing that is the area that Russia wants now. Crimea. Do you think this can end without a cessation of land to Russia from Ukraine? Do you think that any cessation of land from Russia or from Ukraine to Russia presents any kind of national security interest to the negative for America? I mean, the negotiation, the way I see it, I think some land's going to go to Russia at some point. That's what they're talking about, at least in these talks. What do you think of that? And again, could that have any negative impact on U.S. and our sovereignty or security?
There's a whole host of issues tied up here. One is, Putin is living by the right of conquest. That's the Russian MO. Zelensky would love to do that, but he doesn't have the same type of weaponry, the same combat units. So they're both operating in humanistic principles, and that's already a recipe for disaster on that side. As far as the U.S., our outcome or our safety concerns, our national security, there's many things we're tied to with Ukraine. They provide a large amount of oil, a large amount of food products. There's so much that goes through that region. There could be things that tie into us. Russia has the benefit of having multiple decades, even going back almost half a century of preparedment, where they've isolated themselves off to not need other people, other nations. So they can last out longer than most. And that's one of the things that I think Trump recognizes, is that the only way to come to an agreement here is to acknowledge land that has been taken and cede that back to Russia, the Donbass region, and maybe some others.
Justin, last question on this. Trump did secure we had an agreement with Ukraine for these rare earth minerals. If we're ceding land, or if Ukraine cedes lands to Russia, does that get impacted at all? We already have a problem with, for example, with the Chinese controlling our medicine, et cetera, et cetera. The more dependent we are on the goodness of nations that hate us, the worse it is. This rare earth minerals deal is, I think, pretty important. I can't imagine that Putin would not have that in his mind as well. Where do you see the negotiations for land affecting our rare earth mineral deal with Ukraine, if at all?
Yeah, I think there's definitely an impact. And I think that really just helps us recognize, if we're looking through the prism of biblical truth as being our focal point as a network and as a group of journalists, I want to maybe pivot a little bit in terms of my response and just say, what do the scriptures tell us about national sovereignty? We're the main reason that we're involved in this, and the reason that all these European nations are involved, is because Ukraine represents part of import, right? And so we talk about the rare earth minerals. We talk about it's the breadbasket of Eastern Europe. It provides a lot of food and other things to other nations, and really that just tells us how bankrupt this idea of a globalist kind of ideals that we have in our nation right now. We have people who claim to have America's best interests at heart, who are actively stumping for more conflict, more war, in order to protect foreign interests. That to me just speaks to the fact that we are not living in a God-honoring way. We are not seeking the best for our people. We're not seeking the best for our nation, because we are so wrapped up in what's happening in these foreign places, but not because we care about the people that live there, but because we're just trying to secure some kind of, supply, some kind of, import, something like that. And really, it does not have to do anything with the loss of human life, which is obviously, those tolls are increasing daily in that region.
Well, if it's any consolation to you, I'm sure that Senator Lindsey Graham will get to the bottom of it, and so we'll be fine. We'll be fine. Don't worry. All right, now, at long last, here is the redistricting story. And since I already gave such a great segue earlier, I'm just going to let that speak for itself, and we're going to move right into it. Texas redistricting fact check. Democrats' claims about Texas redistricting. This Bill Peacock, again, from CrossPolitic. Texas lawmakers are advancing a redistricting plan that would create 5 new Republican-leaning congressional seats. The move has become a flashpoint in larger national struggle over control of the U.S. House of Representatives heading into the second half of President Trump's term. Of course, Democrats sharply oppose it, calling the effort both an assault on democracy and racist. But as we know, everything is racist. So I'm not really sure what that has to do with anything. All right, claim number one, and this is kind of a fact-checking article, so we'll walk through these as quickly as we can. Redistricting is an assault on democracy. Democrats saying and every time a Democrat is going to come out, they don't like something. It's an assault on democracy, and all of a sudden, democracy is precious. But let's not make you show your ID when you vote, though. It's not self-executing. It requires us to fight for it. That's Barack Obama. We will not have our democracy taken on our watch. Texas Rep. Trey Martinez Fisher. It goes on like that. It's nonsense. The claim that the Texas approach is an assault on democracy is disputed by historical precedent. Both parties have engaged in partisan map drawing. Similar imbalances exist in Democrat-controlled seats. Let me stop right there for a second. I'm going to toss this out to whoever talks first. The redistricting clearly is a political tool in which the parties try to pad their stats. And we're even talking about it going into this midterm because the Republican majority is so thin, particularly in the House. Usually the incumbent president loses one, if not both branches, or at least loses the amount. Is a net loser when it comes to seats in Congress. We've seen redistricting just happen again in Florida, as I mentioned earlier. Also California right now, Gavin Newsom is busy redrawing the entire map and basically making all of it Los Angeles and San Francisco. Just because both parties do it doesn't make it right. I'd like to ask a little bit on the ethical, the moral question of this. Redistricting, just because it looks like we're going to have a bad midterm, which is really what all this is about, seems to be I can't say, I got to be careful how I say this. Seems to me like we're giving voters the illusion of choice, but there are so many mechanisms that can be messed with to kind of guide that choice in a certain direction, depending on which party has the power in which state. Whoever wants to jump in, go ahead.
Yeah, let me start. In terms of moral and ethic, Bill did a really good job in another story that was posted this week on the redistricting, and actually the fact that Texas Democrats who had fled the state so they wouldn't have to vote on this redistricting bill they returned back to Texas to get quorum so that they could make their vote. The crazy thing to me is that we have so focused on national politics that literally it is a ends justify the means kind of mentality, and really Texas is doing this in response to other states like Massachusetts and California who have built super majorities in their congressional districts by redistricting. So Texas is doing the same. And if we were just looking at it from a humanistic standpoint, sure, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But when we're talking about what's morally and ethically right and true according to the Word of God, what is the purpose of a congressional district in a state? We have to have a new mindset that is for the local community. We have to have a mindset as a people in this nation that stops looking at Washington, D.C. to solve our problems and start looking at our local municipalities, our local communities to say, this is how we make real change that impacts not only my family, but my future generations. So when we look at this, what's lost in all of this conversation is the fact that, these redistricting lines are just to serve national purposes instead of the fact that, these congressional districts are intended for the people who serve in those districts to bring the needs of that local community to the state house. And that's just not happening, with this kind of mindset.
Well, let's look at another claim here. Claim 2, redistricting is racist. Of course, racist is what is wrong with everything, according to the Democrats. A couple of quotes here. State Rep. Barbara Gervin-Hawkins, what I don't respect is an obviously racist move on what you're attempting to do. Rep. Al Green, Texas has a disgraceful, racist, and unconstitutional history of shameful voting rights violations against people of color. Now, the record here, challenges to redistricting on racial grounds are common. in Petaway versus Galveston County. Democrats opposed new maps because they resulted in a black Republican official rather than a black Democrat. That really is what I think is the issue at all of this, is particularly when it comes to the racist or racist claims. What they really mean is it's not a Democrat. I mean, Kevin, I mean, you can see this. I mean, again, I mentioned to you off air on my other program, Culture Crossroads, I've had people call me a black white supremacist because they see me as lining up with the worldview that is shared by some white people. Well, I mean, for crying out loud, it's thought crime to especially to the politicians. They don't understand what racism is. They cheapen the sacrifices and the striving and some of the losses that have happened in the past when actual real racism is taking place. They cheapen it, but really they're just talking about, hey, you're not electing a Democrat, therefore you're racist. I mean, isn't that what all this squawking is about?
It certainly is. The ideas are always filtered through humanistic lens. They're always being interpreted in terms of whatever personal righteousness is, or whatever their own mind has determined is just, instead of looking to the Word of God to establish what is justice, what is virtue, what are we trying to do in a redistricting situation. And part of the sad fact is that whoever can get leverage on bringing it to the judges even that make determinations and say, well, you need to represent this community more or that community, but they're all external factors. It has nothing to do with the actual justice or merits of the situation. So external facades are the things that are turning the wheels and the cogs more than internal virtues.
All right, we have a couple of minutes left. I think, Justin, we can get this story in. Let's try, and we'll see here in the last couple of minutes here. Let me bring this tab up here. This is by David Fowler, Christian in Name Only, Politics and Politicians. And let's get there we go. This is it's an op-ed piece, and a little bit from Fowler. He says, I think much of what we consider Christian politics, or those we consider Christian politicians, would fit in the category of Christian in name only. The best evidence of that is me, the professing Christian who in 2010 was called Tennessee's answer to James Dobson by the Nashville Scene and named one of the state's most powerful lobbyists in a story reported by All Things Considered. Little did I know what God would do to expose my wrong-headed thinking about politics and change what I'm doing in that sphere. Recently give testimony to my lostness, despite how I perceive myself, at a Christian Businessmen's Committee luncheon. But for the sake of brevity, he goes on to talk about that. And then he says, this is the month when Christ finally reduced my understanding of politics. And let me go a little bit further down. He says, the Holy Spirit graciously allowed me to see that my legislative advocacy work over the years was really based on two things: my lobbying skills developed as a state senator, and the influence I thought I had among Christian legislatures, ministers, and voters in my state. They availed nothing on a most fundamental Christian issue. Moreover, it exposed my belief that positive legislation outcomes were how to measure success in putting first the kingdom of God. Do we have, Justin, a Christian in name only problem in our politics? Are we as Christians too quick to hoist up on our shoulders the next famous person, the next up and coming politician that just says the name God, but may not mean it, and might be relying on legislative factors and legislative outcomes, technical prowess, and personal privy, and to get the job done instead of the King of Kings?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a problem there because Christianity in our modern politics becomes just as much of a banner that these politicians wave as if, how they support or don't support abortion, how they deal with transgenderism, LGBTQ issues, that kind of thing. Christianity just becomes, a pin for them to put on their lapel instead of the prism through which they see all of their work as a politician, as a legislator, or whatever the case may be. They, Fowler does a fantastic job, I think, towards the end of the story of just explaining what a true Christian perspective in politics is, and that is that Christ is Lord. He is Lord over our nation. He is Lord over our communities, and He is Lord over our laws. So when we, think about are the men and women who call themselves Christian who live in the spotlight in national or local politics, do they have that perspective? And I would say for the most part, no. They want to they want to have that kind of as a veneer, but in their heart of hearts, and you can tell by the way they vote and the way that they talk about a lot of these policies and things like that, they hedge their bets. They don't want to upset the apple cart too much, because it will potentially cause them to lose their seat. It'll cause them to lose their spotlight. So, when Christ says, come and die, right? He says, if you wish to follow me, then you have to lose your life. And I can't see that many of our politicians are doing that.
Kevin, I'll give you the last word on this topic as we wrap up.
Yeah, there's so much that needs to be reconsidered in terms of a biblical ethic when it comes to what it means to be a Christian nation, what it means to be a nation, what it means to fear God in the political realm. There's so much that has just been taken for granted of, oh yeah, they're Christian, or they say, yeah, I believe in God. But do their policies actually reflect that, or are they just coasting? Those are the questions we need to ask.
All right, we are about done here. We got through all 4 stories. I didn't even know what order they were in, so this is fantastic. Our live stream worked. Oh my gosh, all kinds of things. Kevin Amundsen, journalist, thank you for being with us. Justin Chartreux, again, good to see you again. Kevin, before we go, are you working on any stories that you can give us a tease of, something to look forward to for people who want to follow your work on CrossPolitic News?
Yeah, there's a new article coming out on the Minneapolis, Minnesota mayor candidacy that the DFL actually just pulled the endorsement off of him. There was some findings of voter fraud in the DFL. Surprise, surprise. So that'll be coming out soon.
Excellent. Justin, how about some other stories that we can maybe tease for CrossPolitic overall? Anything that's caught your eye?
Yeah, I think for me, there's a couple of really big things on the horizon. Obviously, we want to see, what some of the outcomes are from this Trump peace deal. We're gonna keep following on that. We're starting to also move into the month of September. So as an organization, we want to start focusing here in the next few weeks on some stories that are focused on education. So we want to talk about, some of the, the battles going on in public education, some of the attempts, right, to try and divert public funding into maybe more of a school choice option. Talk more about some homeschooling inroads that are being made in different parts of the nation, things like that. So we want to inform our people here who follow us and who read our stuff. We want to give them some information about things happening in the education sphere.
All right. And remember, you can find these stories and every story at crosspoliticnews.com. That is crosspoliticnews.com. For Kevin Amundsen and Justin Chartreux, I'm Andrew Southwick. Thanks for being with us on this episode of the CrossPolitic Countdown. We'll see you next week.